What about did Scout leave?
Scout, so when she graduated, she went to, she was amazing. She, when she was going through ROTC and stuff, she went to paratrooper school. So she went and did all the jumping out airplanes and stuff. I mean, and just some of the pictures you'd see of her, because she's only 5'1" or 5'2". She's a little tiny thing. And she would show pictures of them, like when they were out in land navigation and stuff, and they'd throw her across the river with a rope so that she could, because she is small enough. And then they, because she was so little, she was a little bulldog. She was so sweet. But so when she graduated, she went to Seattle. But she and Justin had gotten married. Her husband, they got married. Let's see, they were out of the. I think they were out of school for. They met in college, and they were out of this school for about a year. And Justin, her husband to be, had gone to Iraq, and then came back, and they got married. And so she served. She went to Tacoma, Fort Lewis, I think it is, over in Washington area. And so she became the funniest thing. She became the platoon. I don't know if it's the battalion or the platoon, but she became like their logistics person. She also did their budgets and things like that, which is so funny because she hated math and all that in school. So I'm thinking they put you in charge of the budget. I don't. That's funny.
God help us.
Yeah, please. But she is such a leader, and she's so compassionate. And so she had lots of soldiers, and that she had to counsel and do all those things. And but then she was supposed to go to Kuwait. She was she was actually, I think her designation, I think, was chemical, I can't remember, chemical officer. I can't remember the exact name of it, but so she went to get prepared to go, and because she was going to take a whole platoon over, she was going to be in charge of them, to Kuwait, and found out that she was pregnant. So they said, nope, we're not sending you. So they sent her best friend was also, they sent her best friend, they all went over to Kuwait, and she stayed back with the battalion or whatever in Seattle.
And where was her husband at that time?
He was stationed, he's a Marine, so she was Army, he was Marine, and he was stationed in Camp Pendleton in San Diego. Mm-hmm. So most of the time he was, when their son was born, when Peter was born, he was on a MEU, so he was on a ship. And so he didn't get back for Peter's birth. He probably didn't get back till Peter was about 3 months old or so, something like that. So, so she, and then, so she did that. She was in the Army for 4 years and served at Fort Lewis. She had Lucy, she had her second child, and I think by that time Justin was he was stationed home, so he was able to be there. And then finally Justin came up to the recruiting station in Seattle so they could actually live together. And then they had their third child, John, and he was there for that.
What about your youngest son?
Bobby was, he was probably about, so funny. So when Scout was pregnant with Peter, Bobby was staying with her because Justin was gone, and he was trying to find a job and this and that. And he was also trying to get into the Marines. So he was staying with Scout, and he was having trouble getting into the Marines because he had a tattoo on his arm. And so they were not going to take him in because they thought maybe it was gang related or something like that. Well, Scout's brother-in-law is a priest, and one of his parishioners was also the gunny who could write a letter for Bob on Bob's behalf. So they ended up letting Bob in, and so while he's waiting to find out when he's going and all that, he's with Scout, and Scout ends up having contractions and ready to go to the hospital. So he ended up taking her to the hospital and was at the hospital when she had Peter. And then like the next day, the Marines call in and say, we're ready for you. So Scout had her baby. We took Bob to the recruiting station. They entered him into the Marines. And then he went to, I can't remember the name of the recruit or the place where they do their basic training, but he did well there, and he was in the Marines for 8 years. He just got out last year. And he was the one that was the most worried. So he ended up in, he was, I wish I could remember all the names and terms of everything, but he was basically called himself a grunt. And, but he had to go to Afghanistan. He went to Sangin, which was it was a place where the English had moved out of because there was no hope for it. And they came in, the Marines came in and took over this base. And I guess they landed under fire and everything. So.
And you knew that he was there.
I knew he was going to Sangin, and when I found out what Sangin was, I lost sleep. I mean, it was, when I found out what Sangin meant, you know, my husband and I, neither one, I mean, it was just awful. I mean, it was awful. We lived out in the country, and we rode together to work. We'd drive from the country into Boise, so it was about an hour drive, and we'd come home, we'd just pray no one was in our driveway. I mean, every day we'd like, oh, please God, don't let there be a car in front of our house today. And when we'd go to sleep at night, because it's just a country road, if a car would come by, we would just wake up and hold each other's hands until the car went by, you know. He was there for about 8 months. And we only got to hear from him a couple of times, because every time somebody would be killed, they'd have a shutdown or a block, you know, where nobody could call or do anything for however long it took to calm the waters and find out what happened and all that. So that was frightening. And you know what, the thing that really got me is that I went to work every day, and everybody's just doing their job, you know, and nobody knows what you're going through. And that just kind of, so I would tell people, well, here's Sangin, this is what's going on in Sangin, you know, and everybody go, oh, okay, you know. So, and I guess my biggest fear, besides him being killed, was what is he going to be when he comes back?
Right. Because
he's such he was so kind, and he had such a soft heart, and I thought, my gosh, his heart is going to harden, you know. I'm afraid that, will he ever get over it, you know, after seeing what he's seen. So he did have, you know, and the first time he called, it was funny because he normally doesn't talk to me very much. He's pretty quiet. He's a boy. Boys don't really talk to their moms too much, but he couldn't stop talking to me. He wanted me to stay on the phone, kind of, you know. He wanted to tell me things. He couldn't tell me everything, but he could. He wanted to just stay on the phone with me, which I just thought was. He wanted to know every little thing. Yeah. So
that was during those 8 months in Sangin.
During those 8 months in Sangin, yeah. So it was horrific. And then, speaking of people who just don't get it, so when he was going to come home, we were so excited, of course, he's going to come home. And this gal at work, she's my boss, and I said, my son's coming home on such a day, and I really need to take off early. And she said, well, we'll see. So the day comes, and I'm waiting for him to come home, and she says, well, we have some things to have for you to do before you go. Well, there are other people that could do it just fine. and she wouldn't let me go. So I left like at 4:45, and he was already home by the time I got there. And I was just so angry that she just didn't get what that meant. I was so angry that she just wouldn't let me do it. And so, the next time he deployed and came back, I told a different manager, I said, I don't care what is going on in this place. I'm leaving when my son is coming home, and you can't tell me otherwise. Because why didn't I do that the first time? But I just...
Because it was your first time.
Yeah, maybe that was it. Yeah, and it was just...
You were probably shocked that someone could react
I
like
know, and I think she did it out of spite. I mean, I think she did it out of pure meanness, because there were people that could have done what, wasn't that... I don't know what it was, but I think, don't you get that this is my child? And he's been in harm's way for 8 months. Don't you get it?
For them.
For them, yeah.
How was he when he came back the first time?
Quiet.
Happy. Happy to be home?
Happy to be home. Thrilled to see us. And then he sat down at the table the first night, and he told us what had really happened. I guess he'd been shot a couple of times. Well, he'd been shot twice at the same time. I mean, he took 2 shots, and he had this bullet hanging on his neck, and he said, "You know what this is?" So he then told us that what had happened, and he was pretty... I mean, he didn't go into a lot of detail. He just said that thankfully he'd moved his... He used to carry things on one side, I don't know, some of the stuff, but he happened to put it on the other side, and when the shot hit him, it ricocheted. Mm-hmm. And then he got hit again, and he had a groin plate kind of thing, and so he got hit there, and
did the groin plate protect him?
Mm-hmm.